Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So I think we've spent a fantastic day exploring a variety of different blockchain solutions, as well as hearing from so many different people that are exploring both implementing real solutions, but also have fantastic backgrounds in it. I'll be moderating a panel shortly, but before then, I'd like to set the framework and the theme with which we're going to look at approaching it. Blockchain and distributed ledger technology systems are nothing more than a tool, right? It's a tool that's used to enhance efficiency and to produce more value. The simplest way to look at it in terms of implementation is, does it increase productivity and does it lower costs? What value is it providing? What problems are it solving? And that's it. If it's not doing any one of those things, then it's absolutely useless and you throw it out. Now, at a high level, I think the best way to categorize blockchain and DLT when you're beginning to look at things is, firstly, I see and I would argue that there are 4 technologies that are truly disruptive at present. There are 4 technologies that are really going to rewrite, I think, the rules of society. And of those, they include quantum computing, machine learning and artificial intelligence, blockchain and smart contracts, and synthetic biology. Now, true and real value comes from one particular thing, and that's the mixture and the interaction of, 1, a real new technological innovation, and then 2, a new business model, right? And when I say new tech innovation, I'm typically referring to the convergence of any one of the technologies that I've just listed that are truly going to disrupt, revolutionize a variety of different sectors. Now, examples of these where we've seen new business models and new tech disruptive innovations that have been developed include in autonomous cars, right, where we've seen transport as a service begin to be developed. We've seen that with cloud storage, right, where you're beginning to rent file storage. We saw it with ARM microchips when microchips began being licensed. When you take out your smartphone, every smartphone probably has anywhere between 3 to 10 different ARMs. ARM being the multinational that created the ARM microchips, or the ARMs that are found within the microchips. Now, to look at distributed ledger technology and blockchain broadly, blockchain being one form of distributed ledger technology system, a good way to understand it, I think, is a certification instrument across multiple trust barriers, or alternatively, a distributed data architecture with varying points of centrality, or varying points of failure depending on access, consensus, and a variety of other things. And that's really what the capability of the new technology comes from. I'm trying to paint this story so that you can see from a high level where things have come from and where they're going now, so that we can delve into real tangible applications later on in the panel. The computing, broadly speaking, has arguably had 6 different waves, ranging from mainframes in the 60s to mini computers, workstations, PCs, the internet, followed by smartphones. And what we're beginning to see now is the emergence and development of blockchain computers and how that converges with and interacts with IoT, the Internet of Things, when you have a variety of different objects communicating with each other, where blockchain or DLT needs to be the backbone in order to be able to manage these types of transactions. We heard from Hashgraph and various panelists around what are the shortcomings of blockchain and DLT, because it remains at infancy. And in order to handle capacity, the level of development needs to be able to increase rapidly. And as mentioned, the primary capability of blockchain and distributed ledger technology systems is trust. Again, trust because of the mathematic and game theoretic properties that imbue the different network or system. Now, as we go back even further throughout history, I would argue that the last real innovation that I see and that I view within, let's say, the financial sector happened in the 15th century. And I would argue that it's double-entry bookkeeping by the Medicis in the 15th century. And that provided them with the consistency and scale to get to what eventually became a global empire that allowed them to fuel and fund the Renaissance. I would then argue that now and today what we have is the same thing, but a digital version of that. And that provides, I think, us with the ability and the opportunity towards, although it may seem high up in the sky, it's important when we begin looking at actual implementations. But it's something that I refer to as the digital renaissance. I use the word renaissance intentionally because it means rebirth, right? And a good way to look at it is as renovation. What we're looking at in implementing and applying distributed ledger technology across a variety of sectors is not about the technology itself, but it's about how can we make any sort of process more effective and inefficient. So I would use the word in Arabic, tajdeed. We're looking to renovate, and we're looking to renovate a variety of different processes in different sectors. In terms of applications, it ranges from sector to sector, but anywhere you can find some sort of level of verification or authentication or a variety of different stakeholders that need access to the same data, that is where there's value. But the value ranges from payments and settlement to tokenizing assets to global offerings of securities and capital formation and liquidity, but also trade, customs automation, trade finance, where you have to manage the life cycle of an asset, but also IoT, when you're looking at creating the backbone for what will become the Internet of Things, where you have an array of different autonomous economic agents organizing and managing different processes. Take trade, for example, where you no longer need to have different middlemen running through different pieces of documentation. Now, the final note I would place my points on are the following. I believe total debt currently, again, it fluctuates and it's difficult to find accurate sources, but total debt is placed at 270 trillion US dollars, approximately, anywhere between 270 to 350. And global total assets are around 250 to 300 trillion US dollars. Now, from that standpoint, we look at different reports and different NGOs and multinational organizations who have tried to quantify the value that blockchain and DLT is going to bring to the global economy, because you need to take that approach before delving deep into real applications and how that correlates to the real value you're trying to drive. We have the World Trade Organization that said by 2030, $3 trillion worth of either cost savings or added economic value to the global economy is going to be created. We have the World Economic Forum who said 1 trillion, 1 to 2 trillion. However, I think they're incredibly reserved in their approach. I don't think the future is something, I'm not a futurist, and I don't think the future is something that can be predicted. It's not for us to be able to do that. But what I do think is that the future is something to be achieved out of a variety of different potential outcomes of what the future may look like. So I would argue that of the 270 trillion debt, we have the potential to clear, I think, all unhealthy debt by focusing, one, on the real value through the convergence of different technologies, but also in the renovation and the tajdeed of different sectors, because it allows the opportunity to capture value much more effectively through methods like tokenization, but also through real applications of the technology. So I think placing the potential contribution that blockchain and DLT has or can have to clearing all debt is because what we're beginning to do is reimagine how exactly we measure wealth, what it means to have various factors of production, and then three, exactly how that's captured in terms of how we measure global economy, wealth, and various other areas. So on that note, I think now, having set the stage for, at a high level, what things look like in the direction it's going in, I'd like to invite up our panelists so that we can go into the direction that Oman and various entities and organizations here have been taking to really implement different solutions, different POCs, because they found the real problems and the value add that blockchain, DLT, and other emerging technologies can have, so that, one, you're able to recreate the way things are structured in society, two, rewrite some of the rules and the relationships, but as well just generate real value by solving real problems. So I'd like to bring up Sanjeev Madhavi, please, if you can come up and take a seat. Dr. Abdallah Al-Muniri, if he's here. Yusuf Al-Wati, who may not be attending. Is he here? Perfect. Fadi Nasser, Khalid Tahan, of course, and we'll be exploring both their backgrounds as well as some of the POCs that they've run or are looking to run and why they're so interested in this technology. So please.
I have one surprise for you.
Tell me.
We have a guy who has right from Qatar. He will talk about liquidation from Qatar.
Perfect.
And he can just put this pencil gentleman.
Aris as well. Please jump on stage.
hopefully next year the CBO is with us.
Is this working? Fantastic. Okay, so to get started, I'd just like to go through everybody. What I want, I think, out of this panel is for the audience to see that blockchain and DLT and your interest in it is something real. It's something real because you've identified different areas of inefficiencies, because that's what it comes down to. What's inefficient? Where can we automate? Where do we need shared distributed data architectures and so on? So from that standpoint, please give a background, both of yourselves, how you've gotten into what you're doing, your position right now. What is your position right now? And then say why you're interested in it. And what I want from this panel is not, we're not in Tokyo right now where we have to respect the order that something is in. I'd like everybody to jump in whenever they feel like it, contribute however they feel like, and hopefully we'll get some arguments going that generate some good ideas. So if we could please start with you.
Thank you very much, Hazem. My name is Abdullah Al-Muniri. I'm currently the Director of Planning and Research and Studies at Oman Medical Specialty Board. For those who are not aware of the board, Oman Medical Specialty Board is an autonomous organization which has two main functions: overseeing training of medical doctors in different specialties in the country and outside the country, as well as regulating healthcare professionals in terms of verifying their certification for practice, as well as to ensure their completion of certain, what we refer to continuous professional development points. So to make sure that the professionals are actually up to date. So CBD points is a very well-known system in medical field. So we keep track of doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals on their CBD points. The use case that we're about to start with BSS is actually to look at inefficiencies currently that we have in terms of registration of starting with the doctors. Currently, there are different databases when it comes to doctors within different organizations. As a mandate that we oversee the specialty and the training, we need to understand and have a live and up-to-date data on the doctors, what they are doing and what kind of specialties they are, and also trying to keep a record of their CBD points. So we are exploring and having a proof of concept whether blockchain could help us in improving the efficiencies within our systems. That's in brief.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Fadi Nasser. I'm the General Manager of ICT at Omantel. Background, why am I here? Telecommunication companies across the world have been morphing, right? They're getting into these digital technologies, not just as for their internal operations, but also to provide more value to their clients. So it started probably 15 years back around the globe. Right now, it's no longer about the cable or the wireless signal or the phone itself. It's about the data. It's about the analytics. It's about the software platforms. And hence, more and more telecommunication companies like us in Oman, we've been getting into cloud computing. So we have the infrastructure that's composed of networks, wired, wireless, data centers, stacks from compute, store, security, devices. So we can offer cloud computing, and we can offer software services on top of these cloud computing layers of technology. However, as things become more prevalent, we're no longer talking about thousands of users when we look at cloud computing. Omantel introduced IoT, Internet of Things, a couple of years back. Early this year, we introduced our big data platform, right? When we look at all the signals, all the data that a telecommunication company has, Although it's blanketed, we don't see the individual records, but there's so much trending happening that we can infer trends and analytics from. So by introducing big data, by introducing Internet of Things, there's always that pesky little thing about authentication. How can we authenticate who's doing what, and how can we do it cheaper? Right? If you look at transactions, especially maybe in the financial world today, if we can expedite the way an authentication of a transaction can happen, that would have big benefits to everyone involved in the industry. So some of the things we're looking at with BSS today, it's not just the setup of the infrastructure, hosting the platform, making sure that's hosted in Oman. There are a lot of technologies out there, but we're not interested in using global cloud technologies. If we can do it at least equally better right here in Oman. So we're always looking at the in-country value. So one of the things we're doing is to make sure we can host that platform in Oman, we can support it so we can provide the proper SLAs attached to that technology, right? It's not just about bringing any technology, seeding it in Oman, providing power and internet. It's to be able to service and provide services on top of that. So doing that, doing a permissioned network, maybe we'll talk about the networking part later, but specific use cases ranging from the consumer space, how can we gamify, how can we monetize loyalty points? So companies like Omantel, retailers, they all have their own loyalty programs. How can we do loyalty programs that are not attached to monetary value, but they're attached to a different kind of value? And can we use blockchain as a way to expedite the authentication or the validation of these loyalty points? This is one of the areas that we're looking at. This goes all the way up to Internet of Things, like I said, to authenticate Internet of Things devices and users, as well as into particular industries. I think everyone understands that, from Ministry of Housing, potentially the way titles and deeds are registered and transferred, to logistics, tracking inventory outside of Oman, into Oman, within Oman. These are some of the use cases that we're currently looking at. ...
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Yusuf bin Mohammed bin Ahmed Al Lawadi, and I'm a head of Inspection and Control Section in the Radiation Protection Department at Ministry of Environment and Climate Affairs. Here in Ministry of Climate Affairs, we have some problem regarding of control of the radioactive material, especially those radioactive material that used in the industrial sector. Therefore, we try to find a system that allows us to track all radioactive material in the industrial system with high transparency and same time to ensure that safe of the environment. Therefore, we wish to BSS company and to find or to implement a system to allow us to track all of the radioactive material based on the blockchain technology. And maybe Dr. Khalid Tahan will give further clarification or details about these systems.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sanjeev Madavi. I am the Director for Technology at ASIAD. So the bit of background on why I'm here at the forum. As most of you might be aware, ASIAD has been tasked with a huge responsibility of trying to take Oman towards this Sultanate of Oman Logistics Strategy 2040. And as part of the initiatives and ambition and the vision that we have, technology, as most often is portrayed, as a cliche term, is technology is the enabler. And looking after technology, we have tremendous potential, at the same time challenges that we're trying to address together. On one side, ASIAD, of course, is tasked with trying to improve the performance of the operating companies that come within the structure. That includes the likes of Oman Shipping, Oman Post, Mosalat, Oman Dry Dock Company, Salalah Port, Sohar Port, Duqm Port, so the list goes on. And we have to see how we can improve the performance of these companies and try to take them to the future. The second and the more ardent task that ASIAD has is under the Oman Logistics Center. And that is where we have to actually implement the SOLS 2040 strategy. And I actually head the technology pillar in that task force. So our concentration is all in trying to improve logistics as a sector in Oman on several facets. One is, of course, trying to bring extra GDP to the country. We have to improve the skill sets of the local workforce. We have to improve on the operational excellence agenda. All of these are highly supported with technology. When I got in touch with Dr. Khaled earlier this year, the concerns and the challenges that we were trying to address were all about logistics as an industry where there is tremendous coordination, there is tremendous hands-off, especially manual processes, as well as information which has to be passed on from one chain to another chain, from one partner to another partner. And that was a challenge that we really wanted to address, hopefully with the idea that this will bring a certain competitive advantage for Oman on the world scene, and hopefully give us that order on the stage where we can claim, yes, we have done something with a new technology like blockchain, and with the help of our local partners in order to set ourselves on the world stage. Thank you.
My name is Khaled Tahan. My background is medical, but I'm somehow in the blockchain space. Basically, we are tasked, we're a government company that's been tasked to put in the infrastructure in place to enable such innovation. The use cases, as we said, come from society. And so, for example, the Asyad case today might be done by BSS, but we're hoping an SME can take this forward also. So we were trying to find the problems in which blockchain can be useful. And then once they're identified, they're brought to market, and this it stimulates the economy of startups to start developing within the space. And as we've mentioned, there's multiple, it's a diverse range, non-financial yet, but we will get there. And, with regards to the data integrity is the first example, which is within the medical field. Bringing in the party whose data matters. So as a doctor, if the records in the health system are not up to date, that's who does it influence most? The doctor himself. So you bring him into the picture so that he can start validating data, utilizing the blockchain to ensure data integrity is up to standard, and the database is being kept up to date, so that when they do analytics on how many consultants they have, et cetera, that data is always up to date. So that's the first use case. The second, with Fadi, we are working very closely with Omantel in utilizing their high quality hosting services. You need high security for a platform, and especially when you're deploying your own permission network for the country as a national platform. So you need robust infrastructure like that Omantel is providing. And as was mentioned earlier today, one company owning a network is not the right approach. So the idea is, with time, different parties need to start joining the consensus of that platform, and the more diverse or away they are from each other's agenda. So health and banking, very good diversity. They cannot collaborate to corrupt. So the more diverse the networks, the participants, the better on the consensus side. And also Yusuf, we've been working for the whole year on this matter. Yusuf, we've had lots of meetings as well. The idea here is import of radiation, and any radiation source that is not tracked or is discarded in an appropriate manner represents an environmental risk to the country. And what we're doing is enhancing the traceability of radiation sources. That's what we hope with regards to the solution. The proof of concept is enhance the traceability of radiation, in which it becomes a live stream. And how do you do that is you introduce accountability within the system. So everyone who's handling those radiation sources starts getting logged on the blockchain. So accountability ensures that everyone is always trying to pass it on to the responsibility onto the next person, not to lie in their hands. And that's how
Khalid,
you get visibility.
Can we get the next introduction,
Yeah.
please?
And Sanjeev is Asyad with regards to a ports logistics, which is described, and I apologize for taking so long.
Hi, I'm Aris Bedrosian. I'm here from the UK, and I'm involved in regulating and kind of controlling the...
Can you talk a little bit louder,
Sorry.
please?
Hi, I'm Aris Bedrosian. I'm here from the UK, and I'm involved in usually regulating blockchain technologies and financing new ideas that fit into real life.
Good to have you in Oman. Yeah. So I think to get started, you know, the way I focus and break things down always is, okay, what's the decrease in cost and what's the increase in productivity? And because many of these use cases are still new, the technology remains at infancy. It's sometimes difficult to be able to quantify that. Sometimes one great example is by a company called Gospel Technologies, which does essentially recall for defective components of aircraft within the aerospace and defense sector. And what they do is they reduce recall time, both time and cost, from 18 days on an admin standpoint to 2 minutes. So I think right now with many of the use cases, again, because it's pre or at POC level, what are some of the outcomes that we're looking to get? You know, as specific as you want to, and if not, you know, what are you hoping to get out of it? Either one, you know, directly on the numbers side, or two, because this is going to be the foundation with which something else is going to be built atop of, which will address those key areas. So whoever wants to jump in, keep this dynamic. Please, no order. Whoever wants to jump in, speak your mind. Nobody wants to speak their mind.
Maybe I can speak with our colleagues here. Basically,
Of course.
I think, Abdullah, do you agree the objective of the POC is enhancing data integrity?
Of course.
Yeah. So each part of them, each of these concepts, the idea is we have an objective. Can we reach it? And if we successfully reach it, it has proven itself to keep expanding it.
For data integrity specifically, agreed it's 100% important and so on. Why is it currently important, and why does it outweigh the status quo in terms of why do we need it? You know, there's a variety of reasons. You need everybody to be able to have you know, adequate records. You always need to be able to refer back to something. It needs to be authenticated and so on. But what are the current problems that it's addressing? Is there, you know, high fraud levels? Is there a cost that's associated with the fact that a lot of times the data is completely inaccurate, for example? Like those are the problems that we're now addressing. So I would ask Abdullah, for example, you know, through your experience, what have you seen now where you know, these are issues we deal with on a day-to-day basis, right? And data integrity is an outcome or an objective we want to achieve. But what is the thing that, you know, these are problems we face on a day-to-day. We're hoping that this technology can address it, or Khalid or Abdullah.
All right. There are a few things that we believe that blockchain would help us to overcome with the status quo. As a medical board, we are responsible to oversee and regulate the medical professionals, and we believe that we need something more accurate, more I would say up to date, to be able to embark on any decisions that we make to allow people to practice or not to practice. You know. Currently, the current practice for verification, for example, it may take up to 2 months to verify someone's to be able to practice, to get his verification or credentials being verified. We believe that with blockchain being adopted in Oman and globally, this would be actually instantly, and the time would be easy to verify someone whether he has actually gained that certificate or not. Is that something?
Yeah,
we're on the
so
same
once
page?
verified, it's just like verified by Visa, but verified by blockchain to all your certificates once you're graduated, and you don't have to like when I graduated from Ireland, I had to bring it back to the ministry. The embassy had to
Get it transferred over, yeah.
And then every time someone wants it, they have to cross-check
and
with the
translate
university.
it,
Is it authorized? Is it true or not? So once you've got it verified and OMSB becomes the authorizer or verifier, it becomes it's a potentially new market industry for them.
Completely. And is the plan, right, to begin rolling out these things in order to, I'll get to that in a second. Actually, Fadi, I'd like to now bring the same question that we were just discussing onto you as well.
To me, it's the efficiency that blockchain can contribute towards is probably more to do with scale and the speed. Because when we talk about the Internet of Things, you know, authenticating many hundreds of thousands of players on a particular network, maybe in a particular industrial side, if we talk about oil and gas. It's hundreds of thousands of sensors trying to communicate back to a centralized node, the status of a pipeline somewhere. So the scale can quickly be overwhelming if we centralize all that authentication, all that communication method. But if we distribute this activity all over a blockchain network, it seems like there should be plenty of synergy there. And in terms of real-timeness, when we talk about big data is all about analyzing massive amount of data, structured or unstructured, but in near real time. If not real time, at least it has to be in near real time. You have your dashboards, you're ready to push a button and make a decision based on hundreds of thousands or millions of data points. You need to know in a matter of seconds, is it a yes, no, act, no act, send in the police, don't send in the police. So when it's that kind of performance that's required, we cannot always revert to classic IT infrastructures, software platforms and whatnot. We need a distributed ledger of sorts to basically bring about that decision a lot faster. So it's efficiency in speed and in scale.
I'll repeat the question that came forward, and I think it's to me or to Fadi.
Either one, I can repeat it as well. So basically, Fadi, as well as Khalid and everybody else on the panel, when we talk about distribution, right, obviously it's on a spectrum on how distributed we want to get. There are obviously trade-offs at every given level. What's our approach, or what's your approach to that at present? I'm not looking for specifics, but how do you look to go about balancing different potential trade-offs in how far you distribute? You know, what is the aim or the outcome? Is it, you know, full decentralization? I would probably think not. Or if it is distributing it across, you know, diversified sectors, players in industry, across government, even globally, how are we looking to approach, you know, that question?
So with regards to, we're doing geographic distribution for sure, and we have to realize what our regulations state today.
Yep.
And what we can, and this is the idea, we're adapting for today's regulations, but during
what are today's regulations for the audience?
That the regulation, that any data has to be it transactional or hash data, needs to be within the parameters or geography of the sultanates. So to accommodate that, that's why we're looking at a permission network that's geographically distributed, and the certifiers within that network would also be distributed agendas.
And majority would have to be in Oman.
Not majority, the whole
entire
network
thing. Got
should
it.
be in Oman. And that's to fit as per today's regulations. Yeah. And that's not just in Oman, it's actually in quite a few countries around the
several
world.
countries.
So this is a learning curve globally, not just in Oman, in which data is being, regulators in general are adapting to where things are going.
The alternative would be, correct me if the approach that you're taking towards running the POCs is different, is the data storage naturally happens locally, but the network itself is able to be distributed towards much more...
Well, not really, because you get transactional data which is also there
Depending
is
on
no,
the protocol that's used,
yeah,
but correct.
transactional and hashes themselves, there is no clarity as per today's regulation in segregating such parameters to say what is.
Exactly.
It just
Yeah,
says data.
Because there are current developing protocols that remain slightly in infancy, but they're coming up around both zero knowledge proof as well as a few others, which enable further encryption to hashing data and transactional history and so on and so forth. However, again, you begin trading off different levels of privacy, trust, and so on as you get more and more decentralized. But a further question is and this is go
Sorry,
ahead.
Fahad. One of the points that we also need to highlight is that data distribution sometimes is a necessity.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So for logistics, we always look at both the internal as well as the external ecosystem that we're trying to facilitate. And wherever there is supply chain and logistics coordination, it's happening as much within Oman as it is happening outside of Oman's borders. And that's where blockchain obviously has to come into effect with the distribution that is not only national, but it spans internationally with players, be it customs officials or government organizations or shipping lines or logistics companies or traders for that matter, manufacturers, OEMs, everyone's distributed across the world. We need all that data to be able to function or rather coordinate effectively and try to bring down either the trade barriers, improve efficiency. The objectives can be quite versatile, but my point is that data decentralization is the very key of trying to improve global trade, and that is the very fulcrum of why blockchain fits right into that slot. We have been toying with a lot of national systems, and again going with the traditional technology philosophy, you always try to look at enterprise applications which are already there. But then for getting blockchain there as a disruptive force, where it can possibly be an alternative for a national system which has to coordinate across 5,000 different stakeholders comprising of shipping lines, port authorities, including government agencies, ROP, customs, you name it. All of that via blockchain is definitely visionary. But we definitely need the support of the international community as well, because just having that blockchain within Oman will not help solve the problem.
Because it's also right about enforcing, the terms and so on of various treaties and trade relations and so on directly into what you're doing. And this ties into the IoT piece that Fadi was discussing earlier. In order to truly be able to automate, right? You can automate clearance, for example. That's use case number one. But then when you really want to get, even deeper, it's when you have autonomous agents that have built-in compliance around, let's say, the terms of treaties, legal agreements, and so on, that are importing, exporting, and processing, right? In the UK, Brexit is the current a large issue, and what they were trying to do is explore, okay, can we reduce the impact this is going to have on the country by focusing on different implementations of technology? But it's still at infancy. It's not enough to be able to get there. But from your standpoint now, what are the first few use cases that you see, within the next year to 2 years, both at the pilot level and then potentially at production in the future? These are the key problems. Is it customs clearance, or is it your supply lines? What are you looking at? And it's because these are the problems that we see.
I think again, just going back to our vision on the SOLS 2040. 3 of the key parameters are also all surrounding global indices. These are all measurements that give you the country's effectiveness against global standards. So this year, Oman has in fact jumped 5 places to become 43 on the Logistics Performance Index worldwide. And that's a huge achievement for us. But having said that, our vision and goal is obviously to get into the top 30 by 2030 and then in the top 10 by 2040, and that's what we really aim to do. So when it comes to logistics, the very fundamental question, and that's a $1 million question that everyone has for logistics, is where is my stuff? So everyone wants to know where my goods are and what's the status, when will I receive them? And to answer that basic question, the amount of coordination that we have to run through, right from the time the item is manufactured to the time it is shipped to the port via a truck, while it's on a ship, while it reaches our port where it's sitting for customs clearance, as you mentioned earlier, to the time it's picked up by the freight forwarder and dropped finally to the warehouse and then to the consumer. It's a long chain. So our primary objective was to improve the track and trace and the traceability of the material, because it impacts everyone in the chain, especially the end consumer, the trading community, people who are importing materials. They need to know about the status. Secondly, the other effect of that is that it helps in improving the resource utilization and the planning. So the ports can plan the berthing better. They can have more ship stock. That improves the revenue for the ports. That again is in turn a GDP contribution to the country. So the side effects can really be multiple. But we start first by looking at the track and trace element, and then in a typical logistics order, you have a lot of documentation that has to cross borders and cross channels. We are trying to bring that e-documentation element through the blockchain as well. So there are two use cases that we are targeting in the next 1 year or so.
The traceability piece completely, you know, it's happening around the world right now, but as you know, from diamonds to, you know, food fraud is one of the largest issues globally. Fake food, Stop Fake Food is one of the partners here. I'm not affiliated with them, but one other thing, you know, you're talking about how this is an incredibly international approach. What do you see, as well as for everybody else on the panel? Because many of these things do touch other borders. Some of them are Oman specific, but many of them do go across, you know, other countries. How do we drive more of a collaborative approach? And is this already happening, you know, across governments with private sector in different jurisdictions and so on and so forth? Today's event is a clear testament that it is. But when it comes to real, you know, implementation, especially for traceability, you have to be able to plug into everybody else in the world, or else it completely defeats the purpose outside of Omani borders, right? So maybe if you have anything to say on that, and then we can go on. Either one of you.
So I think our fundamental premise is about coordinating across lots of stakeholders. Many of them being government agencies, many of them having their own private systems. Many times these systems do not talk to each other. And then of course we have to rely on Fadi to help us with the IoT devices as well. So there is tremendously large ecosystem that we have to tap in. Blockchain of course can provide the coordination layer. But nevertheless, we definitely need to also have the underlying infrastructure. As you mentioned, having the IoT device, having the sensors, having the systems which can provide the event, saying has the material been loaded on the container, is the container on the ship,
and the global partners, right?
Yes,
who are going to share data, but also, you know, collaborate with you.
And many a times that actually requires, I would say, it's more of a handshake, and a trust handshake at that. That I will use the information that you provide me with a trusted purpose and for that objective only, and that there is no competing challenge or competing factors anywhere between the partnership. And that actually is a serious challenge. We have been trying to solve it, but of course it takes time, I must say.
And also, you know, one is of course and Khalid, this will go to you in a second, but one is definitely the informal, right? The handshake and the willingness to cooperate. But the second one is also on the technical side, right? And you're beginning to touch on interoperability across chains, right? There are simple solutions where you're able to leverage APIs to be able to do the work, but that only goes so far, right? When everybody is using a different blockchain or DLT everywhere and running their own solutions and so on, and you begin wanting to bridge them across that. And that will happen as things become more and more interconnected, both IoT, supply chain, traceability, and certificates as well, right? As we were speaking about, right? So everybody is able to have this connected in one place. So Khalid, maybe we're getting a little bit too stretched along, you know, the potential future, but maybe if you have any thoughts on that, and then we can touch on regulation.
Yeah, so as Sanjeev rightfully said, it's all about that trust and collaboration. And the question is sometimes, which circle are you going to join? Or which consortium are you going to join? And we've faced that recently. Especially when you're going on a global scale, because effectively that is shaping itself, and that circle that's going to be decided is not decided yet, which one's going to be the dominant character. So what we look at is what handshakes can we control? And there are definitely local handshakes. you know? It's easier for us to, especially if a technology is based on a team efforted trust. So for example, in the finance sector, to do a project that's for interbank settlement, and we can ensure the central bank is controlling also, and no bank is actually taking that transactional data to be competitive advantage to a certain bank. So you can control an environment for that handshake more easier for us in Oman locally first. And with time, we are maturing. Our platforms and technologies are maturing. It's not like we are saying for example, we say we have a PCS. What does it stand for again?
Port Community System.
Port Community System, national one. And we are saying, oh, forget that, let's do blockchain. No, we don't have it. So it's worth exploring blockchain.
Because you can make that leap.
Because you can make that leap where you're leapfrogging a technology of a centralized technology, and explore that first.
It's what many of the countries have done around digital generally, and it's what Estonia did, because at the time, blockchain and DLT goes back to the 90s, right? There was a public blockchain 15 years ago or so, 10 years ago, but completely agreed. It's as you said, both around the collaboration, but also around just having the right implementations to start off with. Estonia did it because they had nothing else, right? And so they moved digital. Many other countries have been able to make that leap because they also had the right external partners collaborate with them, as you said, to really drive implementations.
A good example is we can already see the signs of Ripple, for example, having already established a solid consortium. You can see the signs in that direction. But generally speaking, most of the consortiums that are being developed are still, you can say there's maybe 2 or 3 that you need to decide where you're going to join. Might as well form and focus on ourselves and our self-growth in the initial stages.
Yeah,
and let that mature with time also.
Completely agreed. I would think, however, that as things continue to develop, it will be irrelevant which one you eventually join globally, because there will be this connectivity between them. You're not. Yeah, let's see. But okay, jumping into regulation, so that one of our panelists can jump in. So regulating blockchain and distributed ledger technology, we'll touch on this topic very, very briefly and then go on. But regulating it is obviously interesting. The majority of countries that have, it's primarily about cryptographic digital assets ranging from utility tokens, tokenized securities and security tokens, and various other types of cryptographic assets, so assets that are created on a DLT system that are cryptographically secured and either represent something or do something within a particular network or platform or service. But regulators have often been slightly confused in conflating blockchain and DLT as the technology, where there are legal questions that need to be addressed across enforcement, establishing jurisdiction, and a variety of other areas, and the digital asset space, which is typically formulated around securities and so on. So I would ask our esteemed panelists, what has been your approach currently working with different regulators or advising different companies who are trying to comply with laws? We see Malta globally probably has the most advanced framework for blockchain and DLT, broadly speaking, but there are several other companies following suit, as well as several countries who have regulated or have provided frameworks or announcements around cryptographic assets specifically. How do you approach this, and what are the key concerns that you have for blockchain and DLT in the long term, as well as what have you noticed from the day-to-day in the space that you're in, and then perhaps Khalid on where, and as well as everybody else on the panel, where you see the direction of regulation going in Oman specifically?
Hi, thanks again. So the problem is not actually blockchain. The technology is proven. It works, it's fast, it's cost-effective, and it's great technology. So it's currently being used by multiple companies, including medical fields, supply chains, and so on and so forth. And you've got real-life problems that are solved with blockchain. The problem is when it's linked to assets that don't amount to anything.
Or when you put data on it, right? Then you're breaching GDPR in Europe, essentially.
Correct, yeah. So if it's not backed by a central bank, that coin or that token is actually worth nothing. It's your word, right? So it's based on the handshake, as we say. So the governments or the
It could be
association.
redeemable, right?
Correct,
for
yeah.
example.
So it's based on value. So if I give you 10 pounds or 10 reals or whatever, that fact is the 10 real. So cryptocurrencies work based on the actual value that is given by the community, or the value of that coin, or whatever that coin is backed by, or the value of the transaction that's happened, or the calculation, or who won that transaction, correct? So that's based on what they do.
Supply and demand.
Right, so part of what we do is we finance ideas that actually use blockchain technologies and have a value to the end user. So for example, if we were to use technology, we don't want the technology to actually cause a problem for the small guy, farmer, for example, or a taxi driver. So the person who is actually using that valuable asset or that technology to actually feed his family or whatnot is not left out of the community. They are part of the community, because money generated is usually circulated around your country, and it can't be held by a certain aspect. So to regulate such a thing needs to be done exactly how, I don't know, pharmaceutical companies are regulated or banking industry is regulated. So for the UK, for most of the example, cryptocurrencies are traded or used as foreign currency. So they don't actually sit with the Bank of England or the Financial Conduct Authority. They're traded as you buy dollars for the pound or euros or what have you. Especially with Brexit as well now, we have ICOs that were launched for European companies that trade in the UK. London Metal Exchange is actually trying to adopt it. So my background is actually Credit Suisse and Barclays, and I worked on both blockchain and cryptocurrency trials or proof of concepts. And the idea was whether to finance a bank-held cryptocurrency and the use of blockchain technologies with open ledgers, so the actual bank value would be public, and whether that's an acceptable risk on that enterprise to actually publish how much they're actually worth. And it comes to the actual community and how much they actually understand. So if you try and explain to a farmer that you're going to pay him with an electronic coin, and they actually understand the concept, and you're keeping them in the community, then you have an asset. But if you're using the technology to solve a real-life problem, such as certifications or medical practices or information or research between companies, that's great, because the technology actually works and it's very, very cost-effective. The issue comes to governments or central governments or banks or whatever, is when the value is not done by someone who's trustworthy. That's the actual issue.
Yeah, completely agree. Touching on the piece on tokens and tokenization and so on, GDP, just calculating the GDP in general, there have been several reports around how it's essentially a horrendous form of capturing the state of any given country from an economic standpoint. Creating tokens, that may be akin to loyalty points and various others that provide essentially the flow of transactions. It may be data related or various other areas, but it also allows you in very certain, exceptional circumstances to be able to capture value that would otherwise remain uncaptured. For example, a simple example is when you help someone, okay? Let's say you help somebody on the street. Your tokens and this idea of creating something that has some sort of inherent store of value in a sense should be incentivized. Good behavior should be incentivized, but it isn't incentivized enough. At present, primarily the approaches that governments and regulators take are it's sanction-based, right? You do something wrong, you're sanctioned. But good behavior is not incentivized, and that provides an interesting opportunity where you're able to incentivize good behavior. Operating a node on a blockchain gets you something. That something may not be worth anything. But the example I gave is when you help somebody, why couldn't you derive a token from that person gave you, so that when you're, let's say, sick or getting much older, you're able to put that back into this community or network to be able to get somebody to help you. I'm not looking to focus on this example, but this actually goes to Fadi, because he was talking about loyalty points and tokens and so on that provides additional, one, you get more customers, you incentivize behavior, but you get a lot more flow of data, flow of certain types of behaviors across a particular network. And at the end of the day, each one of the discussions that we're having, we're trying to incentivize people, one, to use this, two, to believe in it, and three, to just drive a lot more flow and transactions. Transactions not necessarily being monetary, right? A particular transaction can be any real occurrence on a network. So I think this would go to Fadi, because you were touching on this earlier, and I'd love for you to elaborate much more.
At the end of the day, it's all about data. It's all about understanding the trends so you can offer better services. The more you understand your clients, no matter whether these are Asiyat clients or mental clients, healthcare clients, it's irrespective. So in the way, one of the use cases that I mentioned earlier, the tokenization of the loyalty points, that will help drive, or should in theory help drive more usage of points, and with this, if we can call it the frenzy. If we want to create a frenzy of transactions on this network.
Do you think it's because of the gamification? That is the driver because of the current trend?
Exactly. I think to the end users, to the consumers, the me's and the you's, it's about the gamified element of it. It'll be more fun to use, plus it'll be easier to use. We won't go into too much details until Dr. Khalid is ready to announce the availability of this use case. But the gamification side effect is that you'll get more people on it, same people using it more, and that will create a wealth of data for us to tap into. That's the equivalent of money for us. So we can share back some of these benefits with the consumers. So it creates benefits on both sides of the aisle.
Khalid. So that's a very good example of an SME, innovative idea with a powerful entity like Omantel, bringing it to life as well. So this is an example of an SME getting a business opportunity. We can't go into details about anything else.
So we are, and Fadi, you touched on this as well as Abdallah, in a way that data is really becoming the new asset class, right? It's developing itself into a data. Transactions are essentially based on it. That's the purpose of blockchain and DLT, data integrity, but also being able to move that data, provide access to that data when and where. And I wonder, Abdallah, this goes to you. The data that and the verified certificates and so on, do you imagine that this is going to be essentially in the hands of the users and the doctors? Because we didn't touch on this, and I want to make it clear for the audience. Will it be up to them where they're able to share, where they can prevent it sharing? Will they have access to it directly, at a personal level?
Yes, that's the aim actually, is to empower the healthcare providers or the professionals, starting with the physicians, to have their own data that are verified, and they can share it with other organizations. And if they want to move from a private to public or vice versa, then it's easy, because the data they have, they can share, and our role will not be there anymore. It's already verified by blockchain, and they can easily transfer their files.
But it was authenticated.
It's been verified
by
yes,
the OMSB first.
Yes.
And they've made that process for them moving forward very smooth, because they are in control now of their data and when and who they want to share their verified data with.
Is there anything, Khalid, this goes to you, coming around identity moving forward as well, or other POCs that are currently being explored?
It's being explored. There's two key components which is well known for a national level implementation of blockchain, and that's a value chain and an identity chain. So we are hoping with time things will get there, but for now we're exploring these. But identity and value are definitely two essential ones for a national level. Because if you have a universal identity solution, it can be used for the OMSB, it can be used for
everything.
Everything. And if you have a universal value chain, it can be used also as the inter-settlement within, if it exists anywhere. So these are two key projects which we are trying to also get enabled.
Fantastic. On regulation, does anybody else want to jump in terms of how they see things unfolding around blockchain and DLT?
High level is okay, Khalid.
Can I take the mic down to Najah? Regulation, the idea is, as we said, this is a global thing. All regulations are still testing the water, seeing what's happening to adapt regulation. So let's be realistic. If we want to do a POC or any innovators, it's a small number of society that's going to be innovators who are going to bring forward solutions. Do we change a regulation that is meant there to protect 100% of society just for that 1 or 3%? No. You create an environment for that 1 or 3% to innovate in, and in the same time, the results of that innovation are taken to regulators so that they can see, based on experiences, what is happening, to see how regulations can be adapted for the 100% environment. So
Absolutely.
It's a progressional thing. It's not an immediate
So, touching on that point exactly, I think it's terrific what you've all achieved, I think, in the last year, and more successes to come. Around training and talent locally, how have you found it thus far, specifically related to emerging technologies broadly? You know, it could be machine learning, AI, and blockchain. Let's take those. And what do you think is missing? What are you doing to address that? And I think, what would you like, you know, if you could get this out to any externals, so that you can provide, you know, an environment to
I'm going to direct it to the right person, Dr. Ammar. Dr. Ammar is in charge of the club and is doing a brilliant job with the training. But can I give you the details? He would know the details.
No details
but
necessary.
he's doing a very good job in bringing the message out. Training that's specific towards certain targets that we're trying to see, especially, so the focus is to create skill sets in opportunistic technologies which could create job opportunities. So as was mentioned earlier today, AI is one of them.
What have you found are the areas that should be developed a lot more robustly? And the reason I ask that is, it's okay. We'll chat about it outside. But does anybody else wanna discuss anything on this point?
Just in briefing, you asked about the Sultanate of Oman's regulatory environment, and then you talked about training. And I really like our chances in Oman. I know neighboring countries are, you know, there's so much hype now when it comes to blockchain adapted
Sadly.
for e-services and for this and that. You cannot leave the house and get in the car before you encounter some form of a blockchain message. But in the way I've seen it develop in Oman since the late 2017 till now, you know, the support from the financial industry, from the SGRF and the Central Bank of Oman is phenomenal. The way this thing is moving, but it's not just the hype. There's steps being put in place. Companies started, proper control of things. So it's not decentralization 0 to 100 overnight. I really like the chances, and I like the roadmap that's being put in Oman. When it comes to training, my biggest headache, 17.2% of my daily cycles are being directed towards that gentleman right there, Dr. Ammar at the Blockchain Club, because he's constantly chasing us to send more people to his training sessions. I know they had a phenomenal event in Salalah around the summertime, right after Ramadan. That was one way to celebrate Eid. There's one that's coming up in the next few days.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow for the banking industry? Yeah. 2 tomorrow. There you go. I keep getting emails. Can we send in 10 people from Omantel to train them on this? So the amount of resources, the people that he's been developing, it's something that we should all be very, very proud of. I think he's unearthing these gems in Oman, these students, these professionals that have been doing a job for some time and now reshaping them into blockchain coders and professionals. It's just something that we should all be very proud of.
We should give Ammar a round of applause. I think on that note, we've touched on a lot of points, and you're completely right. Starting small, starting with real value-added applications and POCs is the way to go. You're not going to leapfrog, but you clearly have a lot of support, and it'll go forward, and you'll create the environment that builds something new and something beneficial. So thank you to the audience, thank you to the panelists, and yeah, bye-bye.